Before we adjourn, Dr. Reiswick, I know you and your team track a variety of data points that relate to student achievement and student learning. So I was wondering, I'd love to hear more about how y'all approach that data. Is there any way that we could get a presentation for our next month's work session from your team?
Sure, we could do that. We could share some of that, and I'll look at Ms. Lautner, her team too, on the research end. So we'd be happy to. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So, Madam Chair,
yes.
Is that also including the data that was requested tonight?
Dr. Reiswick, I think I really want more of how they use the data, kind of their approach to data.
So there are pieces in that. Again, I might let Ms. Lautner speak to this. There are pieces, discipline and attendance and different kinds of things that we track with that, with the academic data too. So I don't know if Ms. Lautner, if you'd like to speak to that.
Because I think they kind of go together with that academic data, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for the question. What we could do is really provide kind of an overview of the data that we have at our disposal, how we use that specifically to impact student achievement, and what we're looking at as we consider what students need to be prepared and ready to learn when they reach our classrooms, and kind of how we approach that spectrum.
Yeah, that's what I would love to see that, if that's okay for the next work session.
But I would also like to see the discipline data that was requested tonight. And I would like to see that on a regular basis, because that is something that we did have in the previous strategic plan, that we would have that data available, and the community is showing up asking for it. So I think if we want to be in response to those whom we serve, that would be what we would do.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a lot of conversation about that in the past, so I think that's a topic that we need to talk about as a board later on down the road. I don't think that we are prepared to discuss that this evening. Yeah. So I mean, we've talked about that. I don't think that I think we need to have more conversation on that.
Okay.
Not to berate it, but we have some, is it 75, 85 folk here tonight? So I guess you all got to come back next meeting to see if we have it.
We're here. Ms. Christie.
Yeah, just to, I'm sorry. Are we done? Okay. So just to piggyback off of what Ms. Horn has said, personally, I'm not supportive of just tracking the discipline data without sharing the bigger picture. I do think there are unintended consequences. I think I've discussed these with the law department recently, and I do have some concerns about that. I think that would need to be a bigger board discussion before we move forward with that.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, can you inform the board, if you're willing to, what prompted you to ask for that question of Dr. Reiswick?
Yeah, I'm just curious, because I know we've heard a lot from this, but I think it really, the overarching theme is student learning and academic outcomes, and so I'd like to see just kind of the approach, how that's used, and I think that would be a good topic for our work session.
Is it fair to say that it doesn't sound like you planned to ask for that tonight, that you asked for it in response to the people who came tonight?
Well, I knew we would have a crowd here, and so I just kind of want to understand myself how the district kind of goes about using their data.
Okay. It seems like your question was prompted because of the group that were here, and the group that came asked for something specific, and it's kind of like we're throwing shade a little bit, like you can't have that, but let's have this. And I get what Ms. Christie is saying, that it's important to look at data in context of a larger picture. And to me, that's the way I would want to see it. I don't want to see it in isolation. But you've also had a board member, Reverend Butler, who's requested to see that data publicly. I'm adding my voice to that hat. I'm happy to have another conversation about it. What I would hate to see is that the last time we had this conversation, it got voted down. The board members who asked for it said we're basically told no through a vote, and the public has been being told no through a vote. So,
Ms. Owen, apparently this is turning into another.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that we may be prepared for the presentation on how the data is used, I would like to request that board members be supplied with that data so that we can look at that in advance. Thank you.
Ms. Christie.
Dr. Rice, do we track discipline? Do we even track that at the district level right now?
Thank you, Ms. Christie. So we do track data that we send to schools, school-based. That's kind of been our belief that really, I think was mentioned contextually within the school, what that looks like. There are lots of factors that play into that. So we do track that by school, and we send that out by school. And so we send that on a regular basis to them. But overall tracking, just a district number, we look at it more. And again, I know we've talked about that some with the law department too. Some of that tracking that we do on that side and looking at individual schools is probably not, available totally for public consumption with some of those, because sometimes it's a small number of students that could be in there. So there would probably have to be some work on our part, like looking at different kinds of factors. We'd have to probably pull that up a little bit on a level that we probably couldn't do it school by school when it comes to that, because kids could be identified for that. But we do track it school by school and share that with regional teams and with principals so that we're making sure we're making progress in those areas.
Right. And again, like I said, I'm not supportive. I've been dealing with a situation in regards to a specific school incident, and I'm not supportive of just sharing that discipline data with nothing else.
Okay. Mr. Watson, do you have anything else? Or Mr. Dupler, did you look like you were going to jump in?
I can, thanks, Madam Chair. So this type of data is covered under FERPA, which is the Federal Privacy Act, covering student educational records. It's also covered under state law. So when we're talking about this data, and I think that's what Dr. Riswick was talking about as well, data can be provided under certain circumstances. Most often that data has to be aggregated. So, narrowing it down to specific schools can be certainly problematic. So I would have to look at whatever data we're talking about releasing, but certainly that type of data in a certain form can be released. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Dupler, in the past, we have released that data in certain forms, correct, to your knowledge?
Yes, to my knowledge.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dupler. Ms. Henderson, I'm getting a lot of background noise.
Yeah. Can we please be respectful? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Watson. I mean, that type of data has been released in the past. Again, the data that I've seen has been in an aggregate form. In other words, more focused on district-wide versus individual schools.
Yeah, that's the way I've seen it too. The only time I've seen it at an individual level is with my own kid, and I don't. Yeah. One last thing I'll say about this, and I know it wasn't even on the top on the agenda, but it got brought up, and I appreciate the public forum folks coming out. Is I think they came in good faith. I mean, what I heard them saying was, you've asked us to partner with you in a strategic plan. We've been partnering with you now. I don't know, how old is Justice Knox? I mean, 7 years. 7 years. I mean, it's been a minute. Not even 2 years ago, this group worked with Knox County Schools to get a form of this data that both parties at that time agreed upon and said, hey, this is helpful. And the reason why it's helpful isn't because anybody wants, I don't think anybody in this room wants to use this data to slam Knox County Schools. It's the point I made the last time we had this discussion is it's an outcome measure. And we have interventions and things that we're trying to do in Knox County Schools to curb that, to keep kids in school longer. The only way you can know if that's working is if you have an outcome measure. And what's also interesting is there's lots of other data. I mean, Ms. Henderson just asked for other types of data that we're more than willing to talk about and put out in the public and share and all the things. And I'm not sure why this one particular set of data is so problematic, especially when you can put it in the context of the whole and have a really robust conversation. Because yes, it's not the only thing that we need to be looking at, but it should tell us something if we're not able to drop that and if we're continuing to suspend kids at a rate that we don't feel comfortable with. We should know that because we should know if those interventions are working. Again, I think you all came in good faith, and I appreciate you all doing that. I don't see anything kind of nefarious in you all coming. I like the red, by the way. Good look. I don't think I could pull it off. I got black on tonight. So, but anyway, I don't think this is a crazy ask. It just, to me, is like really odd that we struggle with it. We've been struggling with this for the last couple of years to do this.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the community's engagement. I think it's great. But I would say that we are each elected to represent our specific districts and communities. And so we have a segment of people here, but there are also other people within the county that we represent. So that is why I think that we should come back to this at a later time when we can have a robust discussion on it. And I think that as we've done in the past, we can vote on whether or not we want to include that in the data points or not.
Ms. Horn, I'm confused. As much as I would like to claim all of these folk, they're not all from District 1. I'm imagining that you got some folk here probably from every district up here. So I think these folk represent the whole district. So I just want to make sure, and I mean, if we want to call the roll, we can, but I'm pretty sure you have people from all over the district. So I want to make sure that's clear. Am I wrong?
Can we move to adjourn?
Yeah, this is not on the agenda. I just, yes.
Second.
Okay. Do we need to vote for that? Or, okay. With that, we're adjourned.